welcome to the third episode of Ukrainian Art Dispatch, the podcast where we bring you stories from the front lines of the Ukrainian art scene. I am Iya Stepanuk, art journalist based in Lviv, Ukraine, and here with me is Igor, who runs Nomadische Bookenplank, an art media project dedicated to Ukrainian art and culture based in Amsterdam.
Hi everyone! Today we are going to talk about the exhibition Pairs Skating, Boris Mikhailov and Wolfgang Tillmans, happening in Kharkiv, northeast Ukraine. This exhibition is happening from the 25th of April and lasts till the 28th of September in the Yermilov Center. Today with us Maria Isserlis, a senior museum curator, art historian and cultural manager based in Berlin and Dresden, and the Kiev-based art historian and independent curator Tatiana Kochubinska, who created the show. I would like to start with a question about the organization Ribbon International, which supported the project. Could you please describe what the platform is about and how this cooperation with Ribbon works?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Ribbon International is a US-based nonprofit platform, and it's dedicated to supporting both historic and contemporary Ukrainian arts and culture. And it was actually formed through conversations over the past 2 years with artists, curators, institutions in Ukraine and outside. And now it operates with the decentralized curatorial model across Ukraine. And they have a mission, and it is not only to support cultural initiatives, but to work in solidarity with Ukrainian institutions and practitioners in maintaining cultural continuity and autonomy in the times of war. The collaboration is grounded in mutual goals and trust, and Ribbon offers actually infrastructural and communicative support, but curatorial authorship is entirely in the hands of those who are shaping the shows on the ground. So I guess this is how our collaboration for the shows also was with Ribbon.
Whose idea was to organize this exhibition? It was Ribbon's initiative, or it was your idea that you cherished for some time? How was it born?
Maybe I can start and follow what Masha said about Ribbon. And I think maybe it's important to mention that Ribbon International, they also made like a research for the 2 years because they were talking to different curators, artists, institutions, like to understand how they can contribute. And initially they invited Maria to join and to work together. And then Maria invited me because we had an amazing experience working together in Dresden, because we worked on a huge exhibition survey of Ukrainian art, which was called Kaleidoscope of Histories. And therefore, I mean, we are working as co-curators, as it were, in a way, and we worked really good. And then Maria invited me, and then we were thinking how we could contribute, and we thought that it would be interesting to work in Kharkiv, for example. And because on the one hand, we are talking about decentralization of arts in Ukraine, but at the same time, Kharkiv is a frontline city, and somehow, like working in Ukraine during the war, I think that maybe, especially in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, it was more attention towards Lviv or Kiev, cities which seem more safe. But for us, it was really important somehow to mention Kharkiv, because it's city, as I said, it's city on the front line, only 26 kilometers from Russian border, but at the same time, it is a city of great tradition on avant-garde, constructivism, and the city that has given so many brilliant artists in Ukraine. So for us, it was, I have to say that maybe we started from the city, from the location, and how we can support the city by the means of arts. And then the idea developed because Maria had this idea of putting together Wolfgang and Boris as a solo exhibition for many years. So maybe Maria, you can.
Yes, I mean, it was a quiet dream for some years, but of course, both artists know each other and they were looking at practices of each other since the beginning of 2000s. Even the first time in the 90s, Boris saw the first time works of Wolfgang Tillmans and the way he would actually build his exposition, and which is very unique to Wolfgang. And I think for me, Kharkiv was a starting point, and we were all together actually in Berlin at the event of Mykola Rydny when he was presenting his Kharkiv trilogy. And just out of passion, I was saying to Wolfgang and Boris, why don't we do your exhibition together in Kharkiv? And both, of course, agreed immediately because Wolfgang supports Ukraine since the beginning of the full-scale invasion very openly. He donates a lot of funding and he speaks out very loudly. And I mean, for Boris, we don't need to say, I mean, he is from Kharkiv. He is one of the founders of the Kharkiv School of Photography. So, of course, it immediately made sense from all the sides for the city, for the both artists, and for the location Yermilov Center, which of course is also very crucial for us because it's safe. And this idea of bringing art in the safe environment in Kharkiv, and one of the very little safe environments, was also very important to the both artists.
Before we jump to the part about the artists, I have another question. I think you already started telling about this. From my own experience, I've talked to some international artists, curators, and many of them are actually interested to do some projects in Ukraine, but they're quite hesitant, logistics-wise, security-wise, and you've mentioned that their first options are Kiev or Lviv, I don't know, Ivano-Frankivsk, the cities in the west of Ukraine. But you dared to do such a big project, ambitious project in Kharkiv, and maybe for other artists and curators, it would be interesting to hear how did your team manage actually to do it in Kharkiv? What were the main challenges to curatorial team, to technical team to do that?
I think the choice of photography in that sense was very important because we knew we can work with exhibition copies. Like the ones in case they get destroyed, it's not the original work. Exhibition copy basically is something which can be produced, which is produced for every exhibition newly. And that was also one of the reasons why we went from the very beginning for the idea to work with the photography. But the process itself, I think Tatiana can tell more how we worked very carefully with the studio of Wolfgang Tillmans, but also with Boris in the process of the installation, because that was, of course, developed also throughout months, and we were incredibly supported. It was only possible because we had a big support system.
I think that we can talk about this process in two big steps. So of course, the first step was working directly with Boris and Vita, but also with the studio of Wolfgang Tillmans. And of course, with Boris and Vita, we really were digging into the archives because there's such a huge material that has never been shown. And like with every meeting, we would find new materials because, of course, I'm jumping to the next part of the conversation, but of course we were exhibiting some very famous works by Boris, but at the same time it was crucial to go to the studio and talk and discuss things and finding new materials, like news that has never been presented before. But also it was amazing work with Wolfgang studio. And here I have to talk about the exposition, of course, because we worked with a 3D model, which was produced by Kharkiv architect Viktor Dvornikov. And we were using the 3D model, and we were thinking from the very start that there will be spaces in the exhibition that are devoted entirely to Boris or entirely to Wolfgang. But there is one space where their practices intersect. And it was a very interesting process because it was, though the exhibition is called pair skating, it was also reminding of chess because, for example, Wolfgang made a selection of a few works and Boris had to make a response toward this. So at the end, it was this part of the installation which was prepared before using the 3D model. So it's something that was prepared before we came to Kharkiv. And of course, the next step is installation on site, which was really complex and challenging because like Kharkiv is a huge city, is 1.4 million people. But of course, many people left the city and it's like very ambivalent because on the one hand, streets are more emptier than before the full-scale invasion, but at the same time, it's full of energy and life. And I have to say great thanks towards the team of Yermilov Center because even now I cannot explain how it was managed because many people left, many people are on the front line. So we don't have the teams. It's not that easy, like to make very simple gestures and things like to cut the photography or to make some print or to find people who would install physically. So the whole process was quite challenging. But I think that the team of the Yermilov Center and the director Natalia Ivanova, they're making just incredible work because they do believe in the importance of arts and culture in these daring times. And it's not just beautiful words, because when you are there and you feel such a great response from the public and feedbacks, and of course I have to mention all amazing people who are working, who are still students, like Vlad, Sofia, and Valeria, who made an incredible job for this exhibition to happen. And I think it's driven really by the belief in this importance. And for example, Vlad, who is working there, he's also a photographer, emerging photographer. So for him, it was also a great school to start his career with working with such an incredible exhibition.
Yeah, and technically, actually, it was really challenging because, and if you ever saw a show of Wolfgang Tillmans or Boris, you know how precise they are with their hanging, and we wanted to have exactly the same quality as in every other European or international museum they've been shown, and we really worked. And sometimes we needed to rehang a wall 3 times until it was correct, and this was very important to us, but also to the artists, that we keep the same quality, the same respect to the public, despite the war situation. And that was quite challenging, also physically for us. But because, to be honest, I work in Europe, I'm used to very professional installation teams where I just say to the right, to the left, and they know how to do everything. But here, of course, as Tatiana said, we were facing completely different challenges you would not encounter in a normal, peaceful time.
What was the reaction of Tillmans and actually Boris Mikhailov when you came to them with the idea to make an exhibition in Kharkiv, which is 30 kilometers from frontline with a border with Russia under heavy shell? And I'm not sure if Tillmans have ever heard of Yermilov Center. Now he knows who is Yermilov. Yeah, Yermilov, Vasil Yermilov is a prominent Ukrainian avant-gardist of 1920s. Yeah, so what was their reaction?
I think it's important to say that Wolfgang was previously asked also to make shows in Ukraine, and unfortunately that never came together. So when we came up with the idea of Kharkiv, he felt this sounds really urgent. And for him, actually, the fact that it's so close to the border where the war is actually happening was very crucial, because he saw first this exhibition actually as an act of solidarity. That was his first initial call. And then after we started to work with Boris on the physical exhibition, and he learned about the space, and he also learned more about the Boris practice, this is where his artistic side woke up. And then he got extremely excited actually about to do this show together with Boris in Yermilov Center, because Yermilov Center is a very special architectural space. It's not a simple white cube. So also his reaction had two stages. First, just genuine reaction of political activist who he is, and the second one of an artist. And when those both came together, actually, this is also how the show was developed. And for Boris, of course, I mean, it's a homecoming, so there was no question to whether he would like to do it or not. He immediately said yes for him and Vita together, because this is, I guess, is also always important to say that they work closely together, and Vita Mikhailov is also a big part of the collaboration, and she keeps the archives in a very good shape, so we also could find topics and works which were particularly selected for Kharkiv and important for Kharkiv public, because they were never shown before anywhere else. And the work developed from the both artists' extreme enthusiasm about this show. It was only possible because they both were very committed. And of course, we were also thinking whether there will be a plan B in case it will not be possible to do the show in Kharkiv. And Wolfgang's response was, we either do it in Kharkiv or we don't do it at all. So he was very sharp on that. No other option. We we only had plan A.
Maybe I can add about the space and Yermilov, because as you mentioned, it's not white cube, and it's really challenging, but in a very good way, the space itself, because this institution, it's like new institution, I would say. It was established in 2012. It's part of the university, both physically and legally. It's part of the Horizon University in Kharkiv. And in that sense, it also fits the European practice of universities with educational centers, fulfilling the mission of the university as education. And in Kharkiv, in the Karazin University, it's also interesting that Yermilov Center, which is named after Vasil Yermilov, as you mentioned there, avant-garde artist from Kharkiv who lived all of his life there and who is a pioneer of design in Ukraine. It's also like geographically speaking, because the university is really huge, and it's opposed to the another center, which is Landau Center, which is about science and named after great physician Lev Landau, who also worked in Kharkiv. So the whole context of the city where science and arts technology intersected was also very much important. And the Yermilov Center, as I said, it's located in the university, and it's an underground space. Therefore, today it also functions as a certified bomb shelter. The building goes back to the 20th century. So it's all made of concrete with open structures, giving different perspectives, multiple gazes, because the whole structure, when you enter the space, it's really open. And the first impression could be that it's very symmetrical, because you have you can go to the right, to the left, and then you meet in another semicircular space that reminds of I don't know, we called it altar, somebody would call it amphitheater, but when you look attentively, it's all uneven, like all levels are uneven, and it's very complex. And we were amazed how Wolfgang Studio worked with a 3D model, because it took into account and considered all these different perspectives. And when you navigate the space, the photography and the juxtaposition of different works built new and new dialogues that we invite the viewers to explore by themselves. It's really very challenging, but very beautiful space.
And an important part, in the 90s, it was for a short period of time, it was a nightclub. And that fact, of course, for Wolfgang was another layer why he loved the idea.
Speaking about dialects, could you please tell us more about the series that are exhibited, more about the works and how you actually built those dialects? What are those dialects about?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we start generally how we conceived the whole show, because as you mentioned, or we mentioned, I don't know who mentioned, it's the first show of Wolfgang Tillmans in Ukraine. So he never been shown before. And that was, of course, in the beginning of our thinking, how we want to build the exposition. We were thinking we first need to show a classical Wolfgang Tillmans. We need to start with this because Ukrainian public never saw a classical Wolfgang, why he is actually so famous and so beloved, and one of the 100 most important artists in the world. But then Boris is, of course, is very well known in Kharkiv. So we cannot do the same best of Boris, because that's already known and shown enough. So this is where the dialogue actually started. How do we select the works which serve both? Like on one hand we show best of, on other hand we show something which was never been shown before, without losing the balance between both artists. So it started with the classic juxtaposition of two big photographers with their main topics, and on the right hand we have Wolfgang's side, on the left we have Boris' side, and of course the mix of the works of Wolfgang were selected from different years, really absolute highlights. You would know, like if you see those images, you know these images, you saw them in the multiple publications. But then, of course, after this, when the dialogue started, it became more specific, and Wolfgang would show his proposals of the wall to us and to Boris, and then we would respond with our wishes, what we think might be better fitting to Kharkiv contexts. And in response to that, Boris would also think of which works he would like to include in his selection. And then he would present it to Wolfgang, and Wolfgang would respond to that. So it was a constant conversation with the means of their artworks. And that's why we talk about the dialogue, because even if they are not shown on the one wall together in the whole show, it's the topics they're depicting are usually in conversation with each other, either formally or like from the top, like from the theme wise. And I think two important themes which we were working on is one, the human body and the fragility of the human body, but also borders, waters, Crimea, and those topics. And maybe Tatiana can speak more about the curatorial topic.
Yeah, I think that the main lines were human body and the borders. And as also Masha mentioned, that Boris is so much known in Kharkiv. So we were thinking how to make this like relevant, appropriate balance in showing some highlights, but at the same time to uncover something which was hidden or not just shown from the archives. And like one of the dialects, I think, which is really important is between the work by Wolfgang the state we're in, where like these waves are also talking about this, not the waves are talking, but I mean, it signifies also about these borders, which are very fluid. And it's something which is so much relevant to Ukraine, but which is shown in a very implicit way, because it's like an amazing artwork, but at the same time in dialect.
It's a seascape, because people maybe don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah, a monumental photograph that depicts the seascape, like endless, which is horizon line, but we understand that this horizon line also could indicate on these borders, which are so fluid. And as I was starting to say, that like, it's very much important in Ukraine right now when we are facing this like occupation and this fluidity of borders. But at the same time, this work builds a dialogue with the huge section of Boris's works, where we made a selection of works which were made in Crimea in different times. Of course, we have a few works from his famous Crimean Snobism series, just a few, but at the same time, we included a few works which were printed from the negatives that have never been shown as depiction of the Black Sea from the late 60s, but also from the 70s and 80s, but also a huge series which was made in Fox Bay in the early 90s, where women are given birth to children just in water, just in the sea. And Boris was so much stricken with this situation, how they give a birth to a child and then bring this newborn baby to the sun. And it's also a few images from this cycle, but altogether they bring this feeling of Crimea as a place of freedom. And also even like when I was a student, for us, Crimea, which was like a very special place where you can be very complex, you could be very subjective, where you can just be human without this, social norms, not being like, not just following the social norms, like being yourself with all the complexities and subjectivities. And so it's like in a way like golden age with Crimea. And it's one of the dialects which is very important. It occupies the whole floor, because as I said, Yermilov is in underground, but there are two floors. One is underground and the second is like underground. So you go deeper and you discover these seascapes. And again, of course, this human body. And there is also this cycle of naked male bodies, also not far from the waterfall. So like altogether, it creates this environment of like feeling yourself. And also, I think it's important with these dialogues, like how to emphasize maybe common values, because on the one hand, Wolfgang and Boris are so different, because of course they grew up in completely different contexts. And they have 30 years, like Boris was born in 38 and Wolfgang in 68. And Wolfgang, who was growing up in the situation of the West Germany with full freedom. And as he mentioned also during the conversation, that after the Nazi time in Germany, it was like a feeling that you could do and you could express in art so much freely, because there was such a great fear that this reality might come back. Therefore, you could express any freedom in arts in order not let it come to reality again. And of course, Boris' context was completely different. He lived behind the Iron Curtain. But at the same time, despite all this different backgrounds, education, social life, cultural life, etc., we wanted to emphasize something that they share in terms of language and topics and humanity.
Yeah, and they call each other kindred spirits, which is very beautiful, which we totally agree with.
So this the pair skating is very complex and multi-layered project from what we've heard so far. So for any potential visitors, do you have any curatorial tours or parallel program or anything to guide the visitors through this really complex journey? Do you have anything like this planned?
Yeah, we have. We will have a public program. And of course, we are doing the guided tours, and we made the first one after the opening. And we also invited art historian who is working with photography, Halina Gleba, who is already working on the public program. And of course, we will have guided tours. But for us, and it was also a request of Natalia, that we really want to focus on offline events because it's really hard to reach Kharkiv. And therefore, this public program, of course, we are welcoming anyone to come, but we, like, of course, it's very personal responsibility to come or not to come to the city of Kharkiv. But within this program, it's really important to focus on the local audience and to make something for people who are there. And therefore, we are doing only offline events which are there. And the program will be divided into different sections. And one of them is collective reading. So we are selecting different texts about photography or philosophy or literature or different disciplines which are like near to photography. And we want to create a cross-disciplinary dialogue based on the show. And it's really a collective reading. So we invite the audience and given the text, and so people can come and we will have moderators and we will share thoughts. So we want to think of the exhibition, as Masha already said, it's a safe space in different things like physical safe space, but at the same time, we want to create a space for safe communication where we could reflect on a variety of topics through the exhibition. So therefore, there will be a lot of things happening.
Yes, and we already, of course, have provided texts about what we were just discussing, the both main curatorial topics, explaining the way how we worked and what are the main themes of this exhibition. And I think also important information is we wanted to bring artist voices to the public in Kharkiv. So before the opening in Kharkiv, we had a big event in Berlin with both Boris and Wolfgang in a dialogue with each other, talking how they work for the show and generally about their work. And this is a 1.5 hours long amazing conversation, which is presented in Yermilov Center and online as well on Yermilov website. So people in Kharkiv, if they really want to understand how artists think, what is their approach, they can sit down and listen to their own voices explaining in their own words how basically this project came together.
But I need to add, you didn't mention that this conversation happened in Hamburger Bahnhof, February. So for us, it was also important to position and to talk about the exhibition before it started. So it was in Hamburger Bahnhof, and we have this documentation in Kharkiv present. But basically, we have like education part because we have books. Because now we are already thinking about the public program because now we are working on this. But we have to mention that we have a special space within the Yermilov Center where we have a beautiful booklet that we printed for the show, and it's present in the Yermilov Center. We have books, we have this conversation. So we have like edu room. Before entering the main exhibition, we have an education room. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. It's interesting that you told that pre-event of the before exhibition happened in Berlin, because there is a kind of Kharkiv inside semi-joke, semi-point of view that Kharkiv is a new Berlin. So it's, it's literally happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because both artists are also based in Berlin. They're also Berliners, so so that made sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and also you stated in one of the interviews that Tillmans' show is going to happen in Hamburg and in his hometown as well. So it's also like a pair getting back to hometowns, yeah, with this series of exhibition. Or this Tillmans show will be separate?
It's a bit separate. So Wolfgang actually, and this is also why it's so special, Wolfgang has 3 other big solo shows this year. He already opened one in March in Dresden here with us in Albertinum. Then he had a show in Remscheid, which is his homecoming to his own home, then Kharkiv. And just now in June on the 12th, next week, I'm going to the Paris because he opens a huge 5,000 square meter show in the Centre Pompidou. So Kharkiv is in between Dresden, Remscheid, Kharkiv, Paris, which for us was also very important to include it in this, European context and put it back on the map because it was on the map in the 20th century, and then unfortunately for a while not so much. And now with this show, it was also one of our aims, of course, to put it back on the map.
Good. And what can you say about the current photo art photo scene in Kharkiv, because there are some people even from first generation of Kharkiv School of Photography still living in Kharkiv, from second generation, from third, and from fourth generation. Were they at the probably they were at the opening exhibition or the some events. And what is now happening with Kharkiv photography, not just Kharkiv School of Photography, but overall within this art area?
I think that I'm not authorized. I cannot really make a good, profound answer, because anyhow, it's like being outside, because I'm based in Kiev. It's not that you are constantly observing the situation, but of course there were a lot of photographers and people coming to the opening, like for example Vladislav Krasnyshchuk, who is part of Shilo Group. Of course he was there, and for many people who are there would say that it was a huge present for the city itself. But from my perspective, talking about myself, I would say that I'm working in the ambient of visual arts generally. And I think that in Ukraine, of course, it's a huge turn to the reportage photography. And with this exhibition, for us, it was important to keep this high level of photography as an art medium within their visual arts field in the first place. But of course, it's a huge turn, but at the same time, really important development of war photography, reportage photography. But this exhibition is not about this, and it's something that we also discussed a lot with Maria, that now when many collections, historical collections, are being stored or evacuated, and we have this gap, and we can use this gap as an opportunity to talk about contemporary art and to embed more contemporary art knowledge in the country. And of course, we would treat this exhibition as an art exhibition in the first place. So therefore, I think it won't be ethical from my side to answer about the developments of photography in Kharkiv right now.
Yeah, I would agree with Tatiana. I mean, for me, even less. Yes, unfortunately. But of course, what I think is very important, what Tatiana said, is that we really, for us, was important to show this other way of photography and this possibility, this opportunity which this medium is offering to an artist or photographer to go in this artistic direction. And even I would maybe try to quote or remember the words of Boris, that he sees this exhibition as as a possible way outside of the war. So what happens after, because basically he was an artist. He saw himself as an artist after the Second World War, and everything he's showing in with his works is something after the war, and it's kind of like an opportunity to see what can happen. What Tatiana was saying about Wolfgang, after the National Socialism, this freedom, after the Second World War, still this opportunity for a photographer, for an artist, which Boris found for himself. It's a little bit like the way outside of it, but we'll see. It's his hope, of course, and we can only be hopeful in that sense.
I have another two quick questions. The first one is, do you plan a print catalog? I myself am a person from the print media, so that would be an obvious question. Yeah, that's the first one. The print catalog.
It's a difficult question. We're in
Okay.
discussion. Let's put it that way. We cannot answer it at this
Very well.
point. We do have a printed publication, which has already essays and some works of the artist. But of course, ideally, we would like to make a printed book after the show with the images from Yermilov Center. But this is at the moment in conversation. So I hope to have more updates on that soon.
And the second question is, what would be a couple of hints to international curators on making a project in Ukraine now?
I will try to be short, because on the one hand, it's a very tricky question to give a hint to someone, especially now when the situation is so uneven and everything is changing every day. So I would ask myself who I am to give an advice or a hint. But from my experience, because we worked this year and also we worked last year on another project, and for us it was important to include local voices and to make as a cooperation. I think it's really important to to integrate and to learn the context and to ask questions, because there is a big possibility of being trapped into the situation or being accused of exploiting the war context, or just being accused that, or you are like exploiting the situation or speculating on the war. And it's like, it's something that can easily happen. But there is a lot of artists and curators who really want to bring this solidarity with Ukraine, but there is also like how to do it, how dare I, is it ethical to bring? So therefore, I think it's really important to ask questions, to cooperate, to collaborate, to ask what is needed, what is not needed, what is sufficient, what is not. But at the same time, like, for example, people are living here in a really harsh reality. Therefore, on the one hand, we should bring works and like statements which like that would not re-traumatize people, but at the same time, no one is living in pink sky. Like, so it's important to have this balance in terms of what we show, how we show, because it might seem from the local audience, it might seem invasive when somebody's coming. Therefore, I think it's really important to go into cooperation, in collaboration, and asking questions, what is needed, and to include local audiences and local voices to develop projects together. So I think this togetherness is something which is really important.
I would totally agree with Tatiana. For me, since I'm not based in Ukraine, I would never do a project without having somebody from the local side doing it with me, because otherwise I would feel I don't have enough inside knowledge. But I can also say from the outside side, that there are really a lot of people who want to share this and show the solidarity, but they don't know how. So of course, if the invitation is coming from Ukrainian side, it's way much easier for them. And there I can also just name an example of Barbara Kruger, with whom we just did the train with the Ukrainian railways. And Barbara, when I approached her, she was, yeah, I really want to show my solidarity. I just didn't know how. So if this project is possible, of course I'm in. So a lot of people would want to do it, but they just don't know how. And I feel it's a little bit on the side of, on the Ukrainian side, to open the doors, to invite, to look for these opportunities, because of course collaborations are very valuable, and they build bridges, which we desperately need at this time.
I just wanted to add, like, again, a huge words of thanks to Natalia in Yermilov Center, because, you know, we are in the most safe situation, but she's the one who would say, guys, you don't even imagine how much it is important to bring art now, here and now. And she's the one who was supporting us when you have doubts, like, how can I, how dare I, etc. She's the one who would say, it's support, and please do this. Let's do this together. So, and it's very important to say again and emphasize this.
Thank you. That's a very valuable piece of advice, I think. The dialogue, the context, and cooperation, that's the key, I guess. Thank you for this conversation. It was rather interesting for me, especially because I haven't been to Kharkiv, and now I really want to go and see this exhibition. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for invitation. And yeah, and I just want to also use this last moments to thanks to everyone who was involved in the show, Ribbon International, their team, Yermilov Center, the studio of Wolfgang Tillmans, and of course Boris and Vita Mikhailov. It's just, without them this wouldn't be possible. So yeah, thank you so much.
And that would be it for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please give it a rating and a review. It will help more people find it and hear about Ukrainian art. Thank you for listening.